What's your view on doing it in a ceremonial setting with songs and shamans, or like doing it like with more like research type, like more what do you call it? Scientific, like very structured. What's your view on this? And like doing one full hit and then letting it go, or doing extra hits?
Okay. So my ideal format would actually be a little bit somewhere in between the full-on ceremonial approach or the full-on clinical approach.
Hmm.
That I am not personally a fan of over ceremonializing things and putting on a show and making people go through long, elaborate rituals. I'm just not a fan. I don't think it's necessary. But I also don't think it should just be I'm a scientist in a white cloak and you're in a doctor's office, that's very impersonal. So I think having a balance between the two where we have a comfortable space. I also am generally of the opinion that doing one-on-one work with a client tends to be more productive than group work. But I think that there's also room for group experiences. You can learn a lot by being with other people and being able to observe and feel other people's experiences. Um, but most people, especially with 5-MeO, do tend to say that they feel that they get the most out of it when they have a more private context and that it's not over ritualized, but that it is comfortable. So I do think that it's very important that music be a part of the experience. I think the space should be comfortable. Um, uh, People should feel that they can trust and that they can go through whatever they need to go through. That's really the most important, that they feel that they are allowed to scream or yell or throw up or take their clothes
Hmm.
off or freak out or whatever it is, and that they're not going to be judged for that. And that it's not going to disrupt anybody else's experience. That's what
Hmm.
happens at group experiences where people shut themselves down because they're like, oh, I don't want to impose on anybody else. And that I personally think that people who rely on a lot of ceremony, that tends to happen with people who are less comfortable with, I just want to sit here in reality and be with what is. So it kind of becomes a crutch in some instances. Um, and that if it's too clinical, then there's not necessarily a personal or human relationship with the person who is facilitating and providing. And that I also think that there's room for people as facilitators to work energetically with people that they're working with. There's lots of room for that, in my opinion, and in my experience. Um, so it's kind of a hybrid model in that sense. But I like to say, in my ideal version, the context is as neutral as possible.
Hmm.
Whereas, again, if it's too clinical, that's not neutral. It's like we're really trying hard to be clinical. And if it's too ceremonial, it's like we're really trying hard to make everything sacred. So try and be neutral. And I think that that also requires that anybody facilitating that they really know themselves well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, in terms of taking more than one hit, I'm also a big proponent of taking more hits until whatever process started with that first hit
Hmm.
reaches a point of completion.
Hmm.
And sometimes that means taking more big hits.
Hmm.
Sometimes it means taking more small hits. Sometimes it means working up to a really big hit. Sometimes it means working down. It's really dependent on what the person is going through and what they need in order to reach that point of whatever came up for today, we've seen it all the way through, and I'm at a point of completion. Overall, I am not a fan of the method of saying, well, let's start you with a small hit and then slowly work you up to a big hit. And then once you've had that big hit, you're done for the day. There's a lot of people who serve that way. And I don't like it because the little hits don't tell you much of anything about how this person might actually react once they get the full hit, which I like to call your first full hit of 5-MeO. That's the diagnostic round. Now we know how you're going to react and what it is that you need to process. But if we stop there, then it's like, well, we just got your diagnosis, we just got you started, but now we're saying that's the end of your experience. And also, a lot of people actually describe that the smaller hits can be more challenging for them because it doesn't override the ego, but they're still tripping really hard. And so the ego is like, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. This is really uncomfortable. Whereas if we can give them a sufficient enough dose, the ego just gets out of the way. And then whatever needs to happen, happens. And it's not because they figured out what they're supposed to do. It's because the body is naturally doing what needs to happen. So I tend to be a proponent of start with a bigger hit and then see where to go from there rather than work your way up. And I'm not a fan when people provide and they say, well, I give people one big hit and then regardless of what their experience was, they're done for the day. And if they want more, they need to come back another day because I have other people to serve or something like that.
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of that. I think it doesn't really serve people very well.